Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself and
Okay.
tell us kind of what is UX like.
Okay. Well, a little bit about myself. So I've been working in UX for 25 years or so. So I've seen uh, the field develop and grow and change. So
Oh
what
yeah.
we thought of as UX was different 20 years ago than it is now.
Hmm.
But basically, UX is just a collection of different tools and methods and kind of like lenses on a problem that you can use to ensure that your product and service, whatever it is that you're doing, will work for the people who you're designing for, and that would get you product market fit.
Okay, so it really does come down to that experience and product market fit, and yeah, giving some guidance, yeah, of how do you accomplish that. That's what you're. It's like a toolbox in a lot of ways. Is that?
Yeah. So a lot of people think about UX as what are the colors, what fonts do I put in here, how rounded should my buttons be, and that's part of it, but that's a small part. So let me share my screen real quick.
Sure.
Let's see right here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so this is like a diagram of the levels of UX. So like any model, it's imperfect. So you can always, well, what about this? What about this? What other thing? Well, yeah, sure. We can have a discussion about that. But it's good to give this overview that UX incorporates all of these different things. So I'll go through this very quickly. You have a lot of people talk about UX, UI design. If you notice on this, UI is a very small part of what UX is. It's the surface. It's this visual design part. And as you go down, you get more and more abstract. So this model talks about the skeleton and lists all these different things: interface design, navigation design, information design. Then it goes down a level further to information architecture and interaction design. Then a little further into scope, functional and content requirements. And then at the bottom here, the base of everything is strategy, understanding user needs and business goals. And, this model is imperfect. I'm really big on the context of use of the environment in which the people using your product or service operate in. I focus more on these lower levels. Earlier in my career, I started with this part at the top, and I can still do it, but I'm much more engaged in this the full scope of what UX is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One question, even before we kind of dive into the different stages, a lot of times, just like we think about surface, a lot of times when people first hear UX, they're thinking more on the UI side. But also, even if you think you read out like, oh, skeleton, it's like, okay, it's interface, navigation, but even down to structure, it's like information architecture. It still kind of feels like there's always a screen involved. But I know that UX encompasses interactions and experiences that don't just involve a screen and a window. So is that like, can you speak to that a little bit? Like, so say someone is doing, maybe they're doing consulting, and so they don't have always a screen. They're doing a lot more person-to-person type of business, or maybe they deliver a service. How does UX, especially as you're talking about kind of that lower chunk, how does that apply to those forms of businesses where they're not making an app or something like that?
So the bottom three parts here are going to apply. They're not just digital. They apply to service and out in the real world. No matter what kind of a product that you're doing, you need to understand the strategy around it. You need to understand what are your requirements around that. Information architecture has to do with how you're organizing information around your business. So let's say if you're a coffee shop,
Okay.
there's a strong information architecture component to that. Like you have a menu, you have
Right.
the way you talk to your customers, and all that is things you need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, skeleton in this model, this is very digital centric, but you could apply skeleton to service design.
Okay.
That instead of saying interface design, you could talk, well, what is your process for accomplishing what you want to accomplish? Navigation doesn't only apply to a computer screen. It's
Right.
you get around an environment. And information design applies to service as well.
No, that's great. No, that's a good way to name that. Service design is, all part of that UX universe there, and can be really helpful to a lot of type of businesses. We see people starting in this age where they're offering their smarts and they're selling their expertise in those different kind of business offerings. And so, well, let's jump in to talking through some of the different stages of business and how does UX apply in those. That sound good? Okay, well, let's continue on and talk about scalability. So at the end of sustainability, we've optimized this business, and now and even just to call out for anyone who's watching this, if you're at the end of sustainability, you don't have to keep going. There's a lot of great businesses that support people and families and communities that just stay in sustainability. But if you decide, hey, we want to take this from, maybe it's like, hey, it's a small agency to we're growing it to multiple agencies, or it's we're going to do a franchise if you have a certain type of service, or hey, we have this product, this digital tool that we want to now scale into to a much larger market or something. When we get into this scalability stage and we're laying this groundwork to reach a ton more people but still preserve quality in here, what are some of the UX questions that leader should be asking at that stage?
Okay, so it's pretty much how can we maintain quality of our service and product as we're growing? Okay, and there's some opportunities here that may be affordable now.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
like implementing automated ways to collect quantitative and qualitative feedback.
Okay.
This could be more than just analytics that are built into your product or service. Maybe this is more getting it almost into enterprise level service providers for analytics.
Gotcha.
And there's just a lot of companies that can help you with this. Now, the cool thing here is that there are some services available that can give you qualitative feedback at scale, and it kind of merges quantitative and qualitative, like usertesting.com is a big player in this field. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of pricey. Like, I don't know what they are right now. They keep changing, but they offer a really good.
But you're right. They're not great if you're in discovery or adoption. Yeah. You're way too expensive at that stage, probably.
Yeah. They offer ways to automate a qualitative usability testing, mm-hmm. where they can lead customers through your product or service automatically. Mm-hmm. And while they're doing that, collect time-based, step-based metrics, as well as good qualitative feedback from the users. And there's going to be a range of AI tools coming out that will help this more. That's really exciting.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So one thing I just want to call out there that I'm hearing from you, Andy, that I think is really interesting is when we started talking about existential discovery, those stages, really a lot of our UX focus was on our ideal customers and our offering. We're kind of asking a lot of these questions around who are these people? How are we helping them? What are we doing? How does that work? Then as we moved kind of into adoption and sustainability, we're asking these questions about our products themselves and a little bit about our business of, okay, what are we doing well? How does this help? We're moving this scalability stage. Really, we're taking these same UX principles and many of those expertise, and we're actually like, instead of focusing on our customer or even our product directly, it's on the system of our business to a large degree. Here is what I'm hearing somewhat is like, how do we take these things and we really like take the system of our business and use this user experience and this UX mindset to kind of go, okay, from an enterprise, because when you get to scalability, you're becoming an enterprise in a sense. And so it's like, how do we create systems that work at scale? And you're kind of you're using UX to solve some of those internal problems to a degree. Is that accurate?
Well, you can use UX for that, and that's kind of like another stream. But as you're scaling, there's opportunities, new ways for you to collect feedback from your users, from the people using your product. Another thing I want to bring up is during all of these different stages, you still need to be refining and changing and adding to your personas. Because as you're scaling, especially the people working with your product, their behaviors and motivations and needs may be evolving and changing, and you need to keep your eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, is a good call out here. Even thinking about kind of that diffusion of innovation curve, where maybe at the beginning you're getting those early adopters, and so they're just like, they get it immediately. You don't need to resonate in the same way. But like, and then you got that early majority and that late majority. Probably if you're getting into starting to scale and, maybe we're getting a little head into saturation in the next stage. Well, now you're talking to a totally different person about your offer. And so like you said, you're going to have to really understand, okay, you're solving the same pain points, maybe, but maybe even different pain points or pain points that are framed differently. Like I think about, when the iPhone first came out, like it totally made sense to me. But it wasn't until my mom realized that she could like see pictures of us and the grandkids through like a portable device that it's like, oh, this isn't a smartphone. This is like a grandkid window, and that was like the way this solution framed to her as a later stage adopter of any technology. But is that kind of what you're saying is as you're developing, you're understanding your personas better is because now you're going deeper into the market? Is that kind of what's going on here?
There's that, and there's also just people's their motivations and their needs and their pain points may change over time. And if you're addressing the immediate pain points, there may be new ones that come to the surface.
Yeah, no, that's true. That makes a lot of sense. You solved one problem, and now these problems that were hiding behind it become visible, but are adjacent to your solution. And so you're maybe even you're expanding because you're probably, as you get into scalability, you're not only offering the one offer that you started with and that you validated during discovery. You're now probably coming back, and that's one of the things we teach in the model, and is good to call out here because both in the previous stages of sustainability, but also in scalability, you're bringing new products and new offers into your portfolio, and so in some ways we're kind of on that particular offer, you're looping back around to the discovery stage and you're validating that offer and going, does this offer make sense in that same way? And so you, even as a business, you can as a whole be in scalability stage, but in particular, maybe that new offer or that new product, you're kind of back in discovery or back in adoption. And so, but like you said, you now have the ability as an organization to fully leverage some of these UX skills you talked about in that discovery stage to bring on a new offering, bring on a new product line, right?
Sure. And monitoring quality as you scale is crucially important.
Yeah, that's good.
And when you set up, if you set up systems to collect feedback from your customers, and also a system for how you will regularly analyze that and monitor what's going on from a UX perspective, from a usability perspective, from a user satisfaction perspective, and then identify well, these are things we need to focus on and improve, because as we're scaling now, this is emerging. Those are things that UX can really help with.
Yeah, because as the business grows, it gets further and further away from that founder and the person who had the original, like, this is the way we do business, this is how our quality is, this is how our customer experience should be. And some of what you're talking about is, how do I mitigate that distance systematically? How do I use UX to build systems and processes and feedback loops that as a founder, let me kind of be at the front line, in a sense, to have that same visibility that I had when I was also making the sales calls and I was also designing the stuff.
Yeah. So in a way, what you're doing is you're figuring out how to institutionalize UX processes that you kind of did as one-offs earlier.
Yeah, that's a good call. I like that. All right. Well, any other things? I mean, we've kind of talked through both metrics and questions and expertise. Anything else to double click on for the scalability stage?
Yeah. So as far as UX roles, it's the same things that I've mentioned previously: the product design, service design, UI UX skills, information architecture, content strategy, user experience research. But there may be a need for a design ops role, and this is somebody who is focused on putting together those automated UX systems.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And making sure that they work. And I was thinking of one other. Oh, yeah, and then sometimes there's some specialization of UX. So one thing that you do to maintain quality while you're scaling is you have like a good design system in place, and a good way to go from solution design to implementation with your engineering team or whoever's putting things in place. So sometimes you'll specialize with somebody who focuses on maintaining your design system, and that this is a set of components, starting with your branding and your font and your colors and what buttons to use where and what the labeling on the buttons should be like.
Right.
And then you kind of build out, those are your atoms. And then you build out molecules about how you combine these things into cards that then you combine to build larger components that are used in different use cases.
Yeah.
For different features.
And you could do the same thing in a service design scenario, I imagine, too, where you're like,
yes,
hey, what are the values and principles? How does that work out as an interaction? How does that turn into a service, right?
Service design components. So if you have one vertical of your service design and you have something new over here, you can take some of these service design components and implement them in another part of your business.
And like you're saying, that infrastructure, that doing the hard work of creating those design systems or service systems, in a sense, is what lets you scale and get further and further away from your leadership team, in a sense, and your original people who built the company. So you're having people who weren't there a year or so ago, but can act like they've been here the whole time, and they have, because they have that system in place, right?
Right. If you have a component and a component is tied to a code, a set of code, I'm talking digitally here,
right?
But
yeah,
we could do a service design thing here as well. It makes it a lot faster to implement, because now when an engineer is looking at a mock-up or a prototype, and they see a component in there, they know this component means pull this set of code or pull this set of service design stuff here, and they can implement much faster, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time they're building a new feature out.
Yeah. And so something even in here could be, and this probably belongs also in scalability, but even think about standard operating procedures and seeing things like that can also kind of be some of those atoms or molecules around the way you work internally, that you're kind of, again, you're applying it both to the customer facing part, but also how do we continue not just working in the business, but working on the business to make our business more effective. You can apply all of these same principles
Yes.
internally, I imagine. All right, well, let's kind of wrap up here and talk about like the overall, like, we've talked about each of these stages here, but if someone's just chiming in for one of these videos talking about an individual stage, give me just kind of like a recap as we've gone from existential all the way through saturation and then kind of an event. Just give me kind of a recap view of the role of UX as a business grows and matures.
So the role of UX across all these different stages is really very similar.
Mm-hmm.
This has to do with how formalized and if it's fractional or full-time permanent roles who are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And just what goes across all of the stages are things like doing user research to find out about your customers and the environment in which they work,
mm-hmm.
and then documenting that in an actionable way.
Okay.
And then, I described that and then visualizing things based on that, visualizing your service or your product, and then kind of refining that in the later stages as wireframes, as comps, as prototypes, and then continually iteratively testing and validating that you're on the right track, or that you're identifying where you need to shift as your customers or market shift.
Yeah, that makes sense. So no, I appreciate you walking through each of these stages. This has been really helpful, and I encourage anyone watching these videos, if you're catching just one of the stages, maybe watch the two adjacent stages, the one before and the one after that you're currently in, if you haven't watched those already, because it's really helpful to get kind of a picture as you've really fleshed that out. So
and I would add, after watching these, if you have any questions, reach out, and I'd love to meet and chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Andy, you've been a great resource, and I'm excited to see how you continue to help this community of founders grow their businesses.